Michael Donvito, 5th degree BJJ black belt and expert trainer for US Special Forces. Skallywag and AEliteu.com. I sat down with Michael and we had a chat about his amazing 30+ year journey in martial arts, his 10 black belts, continuing his father's work and training the US military and US Special Forces, and being part of Skallywag Tactical and AEliteu.com alongside Sergeant Major Jack Nevels. Thank you to Ashley Gass of movegst.com in Florida for introducing us and setting up this show. A truly humble and knowledgeable man, he is so understated that you just know he embodies the sign that used to hang on my Squadron Sergeant Major's door: be friendly, be polite, but have a plan to kill everyone you meet. Michael has 24+ years of experience training the special operations community in close combat and related tactical skill sets. He's responsible for training thousands of military personnel and has been contracted by units throughout all 4 branches of service within US military. Michael has spent the last 6 years working with multiple defense contracting companies as a close combat and force protection SME or subject matter expert, fulfilling the roles of primary and assisting instructor for law enforcement, DoD, AFSOC, ARSOF, and celebrity clients. Check out the show notes. He currently splits his time working on the AEliteu and as an SME/senior instructor for Skallywag Tactical and the Redeployed. Michael is a founding member of the AEliteu, a virtual library dedicated to the idea that knowledge should be shared with those willing to seek it, and wisdom gained over a lifetime should be preserved for future generations. Quote, when an elder dies, a library burns to the ground, end quote. For anyone that wants to learn how to apply their combat sports, martial arts, or etc. into a real world, save your own life skill set, this is a must watch. You can find out more about Michael, his public speaking, and how he's helping others at AEliteu.com. And on all the links in the show notes, click on them. There's links on YouTube with the AEliteu channel. There's his Instagram links for that. And then there's skallywagtactical.com. And same again with Instagram. And also with you ladies, check out the last link I put there, which is to Samurai Buns and some amazing uses of the tools that Michael has helped invent and partnered in creating. Thanks for watching. Hi, I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, high performance living coach from hownottodie.com.au. And you can listen to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by realketonesaustralia.com, the best and most effective ketone supplement on the market to reduce anxiety, enhance brain performance, and supply twice as much energy as glucose. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, and welcome to my guest, Michael Donvito. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
Look, it was really nice just chatting then. I'm just going to throw out your website straight away, Michael at AEliteu.com. And I want to say thank you so much for allowing me to have a look through the site, and I'm blown away. So you and Sergeant Major, or former Sergeant Major Jack Nevels, run AEliteu.com. I don't normally do an intro with the actual guest, but yours is quite up there. You hold 10 black belts. You got a 5th degree black belt in Machado BJJ, which my little 7-year-old boy does Machado over here. You've got quite the background in fighting, and I wanted to have you on, as I said before, because most people in these sports, because jiu-jitsu is a sport, boxing is a sport, all these things, they can't really translate it to combat, and you do something very different and have teamed with somebody at a very high level. Can we talk to what you do at AEliteu.com and a bit of your background, please?
Yeah, so I'm a 30-year martial artist. The last 20 years, I've run training for special operations in the military and law enforcement in close combat and personal protective skills. We can get into the topic of self-defense and why I don't like using those terms. The same thing with combatives. But the thing is that my father created the close combat for the Marine Corps, and I kind of was forced directly into lifestyle of training in that environment. His system was the first that was adopted by a service in the U.S. Across the board. So not the first close combat system, but the first service that put it from, entry level all the way through. And so that was from 89 to 98. And then right after that, the U.S. Special Forces asked him to do a similar thing to train their entry level. And then when they get to teams after their qualification course, to provide more customized training. And so I was 13 at the time that my father took that contract. And so, I make the joke that he gave me the choice, but there really wasn't a choice. I didn't get to go to high school. I worked at the academy every day. All of the contracts, I was either the secondary or primary instructor on that. And then in turn, what happened was the more experienced guys for the counterterrorism schools would show me what they did, how they did that. And, the idea was, if you were to train somebody with a specialty as they're growing up, the end product would be something that could provide better solutions to their problems, right? So if you had somebody that had 15 years of operational experience, and then they started doing martial arts or combatives, they're only going to be able to provide a certain section of solutions. If you were to take a martial artist of 30 years and then try to introduce them to martial arts, they're only going to come up with the same kind of concept. But if you had somebody that was growing up at the same time, so that was my father's kind of pet project as that was going through. And so that's also why I got 10 black belts.
Yeah.
His whole thing was he didn't believe in training family members directly. So what he did was he had me trained with world-renowned instructors in various areas that he respected, and then obviously oversaw the training. And then anything that was close combat related, he would interject. The idea was that you can't really talk crap about something unless you've done it, right? So like at the time, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the UFC was just like blossoming. And he really hated the whole sport aspect, kind of like what you were talking about.
Yeah.
The fact is that uh, a life and death scenario is completely different than touching gloves with a ref there, knowing who you're fighting, being able to study that person, being able to peek, being able to focus a strategy, have it like there's so many things that are unrealistic. Now, is it
One
close?
person, for instance, one enemy.
Yeah, exactly. So and weight classes and weapons and ambushing, and like there's so many aspects to it that you're not able to place into that arena with, that it's common sense. There's no ability for you to do that safely. But there was a thought that that's not realistic. So what my father wanted to do was he put me in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because he had a traditional martial arts background. And he goes, I'm not going to get on the ground and hug and guys and, work on all this foo-foo stuff. And so like he put me into jiu-jitsu, and I just happened to take to it really, really well. And the whole purpose of that was for me to get really good at that art, just like other martial arts that I had. That way I could take what was fairly common in everything, and then also speak on, well, this is why we do this, and this is what they do in martial arts, and here's the difference. And
Yeah.
the reason I can say that is because I have multiple high-ranking black belts by people that are world renowned. So Carlos Machado is famous in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, and there really isn't much question as far as his authority of being able to promote people. So the fact that I'm a fifth degree black belt and probably one of the youngest in the world, like the thing is that says a lot. So when I say something about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's not because I don't like it. It's because I love it, but I also know where its limitations are.
Yeah.
And so what he did was he pushed me down that aspect. The same thing, like when I got my judo black belt, my Japanese jiu-jitsu black belt, and everything kind of was just a side study to make sure that I had the credentials to talk about things, because obviously I didn't go into the military. I grew up in that community. I never claimed to be one of the guys, but the thing was is that by trying to be as humble as possible and provide a benefit to them, they found that as something where they were inviting.
Absolutely.
And so that was my life and has been my life all the way up until today. I've run multiple martial arts academies. I recently passed my last academy like a year and a half ago to a black belt in North Carolina. I moved here to Florida, and that's where I started the Elite U. So like a big roundabout to get to your thing on the Elite U. The Elite U is an idea that I had that I found working with really great people. So I've trained with gentlemen that have passed away, that have had stories and knowledge bases that were just phenomenal. And the fact is that you glean as much information from these people as possible, and you try to respect and honor what they've done. But the thing is that because there was no recording and you didn't force them to put that on tape, at some point they stop, they move out of their area of influence. A lot of times, especially in the environments that you and I work in, people get bitter because
Mm,
it's a consistent striving to get people to understand the importance of what you're trying to go across. And that fight sometimes breaks people, especially as they get older. And then what happens is all the knowledge, all the experience that they had, it just goes away. And so the Elite U was designed to be like, hey, I want to take people and go, look, I want to know your background, your history. What do you do? And why do you do that? And if you were to pass away in a month and you had 3 hours to put on video, what's the most important aspects of all your experience, just boiled down to those 3 hours? What would you want to pass on to your family? What would you want to pass on to your students? What do you believe that you learned that was unique, that could help somebody that was watching it?
yeah.
And so the Elite U is just that. All I'm trying to do is just be like, there's a difference between watching an instructional and watching somebody do what they do. Right. So that's one of the things about the sport aspect. I've worked with a lot of world champions in jiu-jitsu and boxing and MMA. And just because somebody's amazing at what they do, it does not mean they can pass on the knowledge to replicate that skill.
Yeah, of
Right.
course. Yeah.
So I mean, I've hit that wall so many times where it's just like, man, teaching is an art.
Yep.
It's a skill. And if you haven't honed that your entire life, you actually don't know what, you know, uh, you don't know the process that built you to what you are today. Like
Absolutely.
you have an idea, like I talk to collegiate wrestlers where they go, I understand what happened in high school and I know the process. And a lot of times the statement comes out to like free wrestling or just getting on the mat and going at it is what made me good. And it's like, no, it's not. It was the first year of you doing sprawls until you puked and singles and doubles until you dreamed about it. And you don't even remember your first year because of the trauma that, like, it was borderline child abuse, like that was happening to you. But that instilled the basics that in the second and third and fourth year, you saw results and you could like progressively work towards free rolling, right? Like free wrestling.
Yeah.
And then you could hone your skills, but drilling has always been your, so what happens is in that example, it's like, could you learn something from that person? Absolutely. But I believe that you would learn more by them demonstrating and showing you what they do. And then somebody that's good at breaking down stuff where to take a look at it and go, the reason that works is this. And maybe this is the reason why he's successful in this area. Like my business partner, Jack Neville's, he does the basic long gun malfunction, run dry, move to your secondary drill that everybody else does,
Yeah.
right? And the thing is that most people, when they do that, they don't account for the oh shit moment, because the reason that you pulled the trigger was because there's a threat in front of you that needed to be dealt with, and you fully expected it to go bang.
Yep.
You're not going to just drop and go right to it. You're going to go fuck. And then
Yep.
what'll happen is like there's that, and you're still moving, right? So like there's a big room. You would have to be in a really big room to be able to
Yeah.
continue moving at that speed and not run into them before going to the transition. And one of the things that Jack used to do was he used to always get to his pistol every single time, no matter how you set up the drill. And after watching him for a couple months, I was like, you cheat. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, you do the drill, like you go click, fuck, drop, okay, and then everything's smooth. I was like, but you don't continue going straight. Everybody goes straight. You take a right step every single time you transition. Every time you transition. So you go click and you move offline and then you go back forward, which creates a longer path, which creates more time, which allows you to get to your weapon system. And I was like, you know where you learned that from? You learned that in wrestling. I was like, because that's one of the things where you just widen out your base. And I was like, I have no idea if that's something that was inherent or like one of those things, but that's one of the times where he's like, well, this is why you're here. I'm pulling you in so that you can break stuff down and like get how I do stuff and give it to everyone else,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what the Elite U is. I have a bunch of mentors that are currently on film. We're editing all of their stuff, but the idea is that you meet these great individuals. They are friends and mentors of mine. They are also people that are world renowned, and they are of the mindset that knowledge needs to be passed on and not held close to the vest.
Yeah.
One of the issues that I always had coming up, and it's not necessarily a fault, but it was something that I was first introduced by my father, and then everybody else that was in a related field, which was you don't put stuff on paper, you don't put stuff on video, because God forbid somebody else gets a hold of it,
Yeah.
and therefore your enemies now have this secret sauce or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and my whole thing was like, if you were good and you were consistently upgrading, even if you took today's mindset and curriculum, tomorrow's is going to be better. You only have what I gave you here. So I should give out that knowledge, because all the knowledge that I pass on to people allows them to, study that, and the whole community gets better. And so like each one of these mentors falls into that. And I have hit resistance with some people where they're like, no, that's where, I make my money. I'm like, I bet if you were to just, put everything out there, you would get more business, because you're not just showcasing your best stuff.
Yep.
You're not afraid to show where you're weak, because if you were to do that, you would actually force yourself to strengthen those areas, because you are highlighting that. And then obviously you would identify the areas where you are the best at. And by doing so, people will seek you out for that information.
Yeah.
And so it's been a struggle. It took me literally 10 years to get Jack to agree to put his stuff on film. Um, and the thing is that I know the value of the knowledge that he's passed on to me. He is an amazing individual. He is one of those special people that you are around and you're like, there's something different about that person. And he is by far the best I've ever seen in a CQB environment. Any type of direct action understanding, with a pistol, with a rifle. And he revamped all of the and restructured all of the counterterrorism schools for SF. and as well as the sniper schools, and he integrated them. And so the way that he passed on knowledge was he forced people into developing a thought process where they had to think outside the box and make split decisions. And one of the hardest things about an instructor is getting your students to think. And a lot of times what happens is people don't understand how to do that. They believe they are doing it, but they're just giving cookie cutter answers.
Yeah.
And they don't allow you to move right and left. Whereas he doesn't do that. He doesn't focus on technique as much. He focuses on principles, and he wants to make sure that you can make decisions. And then he just puts you in all sorts of different areas, and you do micro training, kind of like Tony Blair talks about, and you just focus on that until you get the right answer down. And then what happens is you just spread out. And so like, that's one of the things that he talks about in his section. But I basically hounded him for years to try to get to work with him. And then later on, I was like, even if you retire completely from training people, it would be a travesty for you to just not pass this on. Like,
Yeah, it's knowledge transfer
yeah.
right there.
So that was a long-winded answer, but yeah, that was
Man, I've got a bit to unpack, Mike. I love what you said. Teaching is a skill. It reminded me straight away of Pat McNamara. Basic dude stuff is more well known. But funnily enough, there's a story that Pat tells and other people tell about some teacher or university guy taking his course, his gun course, and that person realized, hang on a sec, this guy's a born teacher. As you said, it's a skill. And he, from there, had people coming along, coaches. Actually, it was a football coach came along, and these other people are coming along to his course just to learn how he teaches. Doesn't matter it's about gun, doesn't matter if it's whatever. It's how he teaches, and I can see. I watched a few of Jack's videos. Same deal. You spoke about, it's such a shame if he didn't get his message out there in the community. It's really about people like us transferring our knowledge so that everybody in the community can benefit from it, and also discard it if not required, if it doesn't quite fit there, but absolutely transferring it on. And like you said, giving that information away for free more often. We both teach people how not to die. If I show something on a video that is going to save someone's life and they don't pay me, that I've done my job. It's about helping others at this stage.
right.
I think Gary Fahey from Strongmen, another guest, spoke about after 35 years old, we become less intrinsic focused and actually become outward focused, which is great. It's nice to interview people at our age and level of life and see that. I'd like to go back a couple of things. One is a shout out to another Floridian, Ashley Gass from Move Gymnastics. Yes. She introduced us, which was great.
Great people.
You said that your dad initiated the first United States Marines unarmed combat or hand-to-hand combat. Is that sort of what it was?
Yeah, it was a close combat system that was adopted in '89 all the way to '98, and he basically did that for those years of his career. Like that, he was the close combat instructor for the Marine Corps. And he mass produced instructors, and he created a tier system. And his whole entire thing behind that was, training 300 people at the exact same time is different when you only have one instructor, and maybe like 2 AIs, than if I had a small group of 10. Right. So like your ability to pass on information safely is different. So he created a system that provided the basics of close combat, and it was built all around scientific research and medical study. So he worked with 27 forensic pathologists of all 4 services, and basically he had access to them whenever he wanted to ask, hey, here's a pen.
Yeah.
Where do I stick this thing to kill them as quickly as possible. And because they were from 4 different services, they would all give different answers, even though there probably was a singular answer that was probably the most correct.
Mm.
They would all compete, and he would just write down that data. And he would go, this person was hit by a truck, basically. Can you reproduce that type of trauma?
Yeah.
If you are unarmed and you had to kill someone and you were mentally, physically fatigued, what's the easiest way to make sure that they're not coming after you anymore? So, how do you kill that person? How do you render someone unconscious? Is structural damage something that's possible when you are mentally and physically fatigued with kid on and that type of thing? And so just all of that was kind of built around the system. And then what he did was he kind of packaged it so that while you're going through it, you don't really understand what you're learning, but you're learning all of these different things, kind of in the same fashion. It's been related to kata and that type of thing. And it's only because he was working with entry level people
Mm.
and he had to do it in mass. When we were working with the special forces community, everything was a little bit more focused on what they did, and then when they got to their teams, we focused on that. So that was basically what he did in the Marine Corps, what he did for the special forces community. I was around the whole time watching as these individual programs, and then during the special forces time frame, we were at Fort Bragg, and we had a number of contracts. I believe there was a time where we had like 30% of the base on contracts where you had support units and you had regular infantry and that type of thing. And we were running close combat for that.
Oh, wow.
And I say close combat because close combat, when I was taught the topic, is any type of fighting that is relatively in close.
Yeah.
So that would be fighting with a rifle or fighting or gunfighting with a pistol, using a knife, unarmed to, knife to pistol, to ground fighting, to multiple attackers, to, defensive tactics inside of a vehicle, or
Yeah.
trying to, like the scope is much broader than what people think about in just a combative sense. And because of that, the mindset intertwines really, really well with everything else. So like if all you did was you did martial arts, which a lot of times mobility isn't a high priority in most martial arts, even in your sparring or your striking arts. Whereas in gunfighting, mobility is life. Like you do not stand still at any
Yeah.
point. Like you need to be moving or getting behind cover, and then consider like there's and so what happens is you get this understanding of martial arts, and it teaches you to be almost static and dealing with one person, and you're very, very small focused.
Mm.
Whereas the special operations world is large focus,
Yeah.
small focus, large focus, small focus, like, and that's how, one bite at a time, right? And
Exactly.
so what happens is if you don't have a background where you understand that, the martial arts solutions that you get or the combative solutions that you get actually are detrimental to you as far as your safety and the safety of your teammates, because it's like, you're actually teaching me stuff that is ingraining bad habits. And you don't even know that, and it's not a bad thing to do certain drills or tactics or whatever as that do that, as long as the instructor identifies it and tells them why they're doing that.
Yeah.
Like we call them rangeisms. Basically, on any range for the military that is not a private range, or for law enforcement, or for civilians, the restrictions on what you can and cannot do are very, very strict,
Yeah.
right? And that makes sense. But because of that, there are tactics or there are skill sets that are done that basically are only because of that environment,
Yeah.
not because it's realistic. So there's the thought process of scanning. So I put 2 rounds out on something, and then I pull the pistol back, and then I look left, I look right, and then that is a very small segment of what you're supposed to do. And the only reason you don't do scanning properly is because, well, you can't move, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the idea would be I would be moving while I'm shooting. I would drive down as soon as that threat's dealt with. I would look and I would immediately move, and I would move in a large circle, trying to get behind cover, looking deep, trying to find other bad guys. And the whole time I'd have weapons handling, so I'm not flagging anyone. But you can't do that on the range. And so what happens is, what do? You break that skill down and go, it's an important skill to have. So we're going to do a small portion of it. But at some point down the line, nobody tells you that this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
But we're going to practice it by doing this. Okay. So this looks silly, but the thing is that we can't practice the big thing. So when we get on the private range, we're going to show you how to do the proper, drill and that type of thing. And I've found over the years that a lot of times people, they lose sight of that. And it's like, I don't care if you are teaching things that are not optimal, but as the instructor, you owe it to your students to tell them, this is why I'm doing that,
The whole time you've said these things, it's all about comprehension and principles. You spoke about principles about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I've just finished filming a beginner's version of the How Not to Die. I've finally figured out how to teach what I do to the masses. And the first thing I do is I say the first rule of self-defense: no rules, anything goes as long as you win. But we do have some principles. If we work to that, I don't care how you work to it. If you learn it on this course or whatever, as long as you can still achieve the principle, the outcome, you're going to win.
Yes.
And that's what you're speaking about the whole time there. I just want to go back again to the Marines, because I'm really intrigued. What my background is, European close combat. That's what they teach to the New Zealand. They did teach to Australian military. And that's more the World War II OSS style.
Yes.
You would have seen Applegate, Fairbairn, that sort of thing.
Yes, sir.
Your dad seemed to have done that in the 1989 era, that they had actually done in World War II. Is there any connection between those two eras? I mean, battle proven.
So obviously there was some pull from the mindset. He studied that extensively to make sure that the lessons learned were passed on.
Yeah.
The thing that he did that I feel at the time was different than everyone else is he didn't attach it to any art,
Yeah.
and he didn't attach it to any previous training methodology. Because, so like, for example, if you create a system based off of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, everyone that loves Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is going to love that close combat system, right? And everyone that hates grappling is gonna hate that system. Like inherently, right off the gate, they won't even see it. They're just gonna have this
There's a
opinion
massive
of it.
bias either way.
Yeah, exactly. So what he said was, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to base this off of medical research and basically science. We're going to take a look at everything and make sure that it's medically feasible.
Yeah.
And that way, when you're like, well, I don't like that technique, and it's like, well, why? Well, just because I feel like there's a better way to do it. It's like, well, we use cadavers, and that is an appropriate way to break someone's arm. And we did it with larger people, and we did it with smaller people, and we had, we did it while fatigued. We did it with gear on.
Yep.
Like, these were all tested, and because he had access, like it's one of those things when you have access to certain capabilities, you get a larger area of study.
Yep.
And you can, like in martial arts right now, if you had a theory on a technique, how do you test it? Well, you test it in training. You test it on somebody that's a friend who you don't want to hurt, and even if you were to test it in a fight, you have no idea if the reason that it worked was because you were good and that was a good technique, or if they sucked and they basically anything would have worked on them.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it's not like the old days where, the samurai could walk outside and test their sword on the peasant and nobody would, and be like, my sword will kill someone. How do you know? Because I killed that guy with it. You can't do that. So what he did was he had access to cadavers and medical personnel. that were at the top of their fields, and he was able to produce a product that at least at face value had that type of backing.
Mm.
And so even though he spoke highly of a lot of the previous things that were taught, there was in things that were inherently, like you said, that would cause bias, and the thing is that he wanted to stay away from that as much as possible. And then he also wanted it to be a primer. Like, one of the things that people do is they create close combat systems that are all encompassing, end all be all. If you don't do it this way, then what happens is like you're doing it wrong. And his whole thing was, if I get a kid fresh out of high school and I need to train them, my job is not to train them in the skills of the physical skills. It is the mental conditioning. I need to inoculate them to interpersonal violence. I
Yep.
need them to understand a level of violence that they have never seen in their life before. And if they do not adapt to and are able to overcome, they will die in this scenario. And so a lot of the scenarios that you're focusing on have the potential to be a life and death scenario. So you need to be able to train someone to mentally be able to grasp that concept, rise to that challenge, and have physical skills that allow you to deal with it. And then you can then taper it off and go, you don't have to kill that person, but you know that if you had to rise to that occasion, you can.
Yep.
He had always believed, working with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. He had always believed that it was infinitely harder to train somebody or to have somebody go from controlling someone to killing someone. So, like, somebody that could only control someone, trying to mentally jump that barrier to actually killing someone. It's harder for that person than somebody that's been trained to kill someone to not kill someone, like, to just drop down. So, like, the thing
I
is,
can actually
that
speak to that, Michael, because I was a police officer here for a couple of
yes,
years.
sir.
So I left the group in New Zealand, came here, 2 years police officer. Police academy, a hilarious thing. I was probably voted most likely to kill someone straight away. And
Yeah.
my first job was death by cop, and I was the only one who could actually talk him down. I found it so easy because I was used to such a high degree of interpersonal violence and confrontation, high threat. It was so much easier to step it down and talk, talk, talk. And when it goes from here, then it goes to here. If it goes
Absolutely.
kinetic, it goes to here. But these other people, they just didn't grasp it. And I can now see what you're saying there as well. If they're going from control and restraint into an actual self-defense, we don't really use that word. Suddenly they're going from trying to handcuff the guy to, hang on a sec, he might get my partner's gun or he might get my gun. I had to teach some detectives how to handle that situation a year or so ago. But you, from personal experience, you are absolutely correct. To step down is super easy because you know what you're capable of.
Yeah, and the thing is that that was his whole approach to it, and obviously, um, my father's interpersonal skills, communication skills, social skills, making friends, that was not a highly attuned
Priority.
skill that he had. So the the detractors that he had usually came from him embarrassing them at some point, and then, later on there was issues, so he couldn't ever explain what he was doing.
Right.
But the thing was is that, um he had solid reasoning behind why he did it,
Mm,
and it made sense for the environment that he worked with, right?
of
And his
course.
whole thing was, as long as my Marines can deal with this encounter, okay, so they can deal with someone trying to attack them from all four major attack angles: front, rear, side, right side, strong side, weak side. Somebody draws a blade, which is the number one weapon in the entire world that you will have to face, an edge weapon. Being able to deal with an edge weapon, and no, it's not just run away, because you don't have the ability to do that, in a lot of scenarios.
In
And
in a train and a bus that we've seen. Yeah.
Yeah, and then be able to use the edge weapon, which is a tool or a weapon system that is given to the majority, if not all, military personnel, but you never receive training on it. It is the one weapon system that you actually don't receive. Like every other weapon system, you have a familiarization course that you have to, go through. And the edge weapon wasn't one, at least at that time, and for the majority of the time that I've trained military.
Yeah.
And so he was like, and now, so if you could deal with those different areas, and then he also taught how to upgrade your scenario. So if for some reason you were broken away from your unit, you were hurt, you were injured, and you need to get to a friendly area, but you have a low percentage of you surviving, and you have to upgrade your scenario, meaning work against an enemy combatant to upgrade your situation. How do you do that without causing any type of ruckus to draw attention, that sort of thing? And so he was like, I give all these skills to my Marines, and once they have that, you can do anything else you want. He was always about like, you can do your karate, or you can do your judo, or you could, do whatever. His whole thing was that skills are skills. And it's something that I preach all the time. Skills are not, there are no skills that are more important than other skills in my mind. Okay. So like
Just got to
me
do
and
the right
you,
tool for the right situation.
exactly. So what happens is people really emphasize what they specialize in. And I know that I have broken this rule in the past, and I try to catch myself. But I find that people who are great at what they do overemphasize the importance of what they do. And it's like, if you're a self-defense guy or you're a fitness person, you believe that the world revolves around fitness or self-defense, and you're trying to convince them, the person that's in front of you, to become fanatical about what you're fanatical about. And it's like, that's not your job. Your job is to give them practical skills in their life that are actually make them safer or make them healthier, right? It's not to go, hey, you don't work out at all right now. Here's a 7-day-a-week program where you work out and you have a different, like, it's like that person, you may be able to get them to do that, but that's not the way to do it. And his whole thing is like, in the military, you have your PT test. If you're to pass your PT test and you can max out your PT test, why do you need to do anything else? Do you need to lift more? Do you need to run more? Do you like, if you can do that on command, like proficiency is performance upon demand, like at the point that you need it, can you max out your PT test? Then I really shouldn't care if you don't run 2 miles every day on top of working out, or if you sit on the couch and eat potato chips. Like, you can do what you do. And his whole thing was, every Marine should have a baseline of close combat. In those scenarios, they should be able to defend themselves. You're going to have these guys that are amazing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts, that could roll you up and the next 5 guys, with ease. But that's not the majority of my people. Like, having a specialist like that and having 10 other guys that are useless is actually worse than having a unit where everyone is baseline, has a certain skill, but obviously wouldn't be able to take the guy that has trained for 20 years straight. And so, like, there's always that conflict of, how hard are you actually driving towards? So like, there was a lot of stuff that he did in the Marine Corps that was there, and that was his uphill battle. His uphill battle was to try to get people to understand that, he's a martial artist, he believes in the training, but the thing is that, you need to have something that, as time goes on, it can be progressive, and you can always add in all the peacekeeping stuff later. But if all you do is focus on the peacekeeping stuff, when your people have to do non-peacekeeping stuff, you're not going to be able to rise to that occasion. It's the whole hard times create, we, hard
let's
man and that type of thing. So
let's relate that back to civilians, and let's call that mainstream. I was talking to a guy this morning in America. His neighbor wants to learn this stuff, not the tactical guy or the tactical guy.
yeah,
I said to him, his name's Craig. I said, Craig, if you come along to my course, it's 4 hours. In the first hour, I need to teach you the most brutal stuff. I need to teach you worst case backwards, because what if you get injured? Hopefully wouldn't it happen, and I don't think it's hardly ever happened, or you had to leave or something happened. You didn't learn the worst case first. So yes, we teach the situation awareness, be your own bodyguard, avoid diffuse, all those things. But if you don't know what to do when it goes kinetic, when the person's on top of you because all those things failed, or the attacker controls the fight and it got there, then yeah, you've got nothing to deal with. So talking about what you're doing and your dad's done in that self-defense situation, protecting the Marine in those combat situations is super, super important. And I think people miss that reality.
Mhm. No, they do. And then obviously training with the special forces community, there was a lot of very specific encounters that we were able to focus on custom training, right? So
Mhm.
like they have mission sets. They would go to certain areas where there was a prevalency for violence, and so you train them differently. But the foundation that you build is very similar, and it's the same thing with civilians. I run women's self-defense seminars all the time, and they are 2-hour programs. And the thing is that I understand that I'll probably never see those women again after 2 hours.
Mhm.
And I understand that I'm not going to be able to pass on any real physical skills that they're going to be masterful at by the end of that.
Absolutely.
But I can get them to understand uh, the realistic outlook of the world. I can start conditioning their mind. I can start
Mm.
getting them to think about things. I can start talking about where you most vulnerable. Like the idea that the shady gas station in the worst part of town that you went to because you didn't realize that your car was on E, that's actually not the time that you are most in danger, because you are going to be situation aware. You know that you're in a bad area. You are looking at every shady person and they know that you're looking at them, right?
Mm.
The place that you are most vulnerable is the areas that you feel the most safe, right? So in the United States, we have a place, a store called Target, and Target is where all the women like to go. It is kind of like just a general convenience store, but a little bit higher than that. Anyways, you bring it up to women in the United States, how often you go to Target. And if there's a Target near them, they go every day. Right. So I'm like, here it is. I know that you have a routine that you do in that store. You go in, you go to the Starbucks, get a coffee, then you go to, this aisle, which is all of the discounted stuff, and then you go to
Mhm.
the women thing. And I was like, I bet that you do pretty much the same kind of scan every single time, and you have no idea who is near you. Like I was like, the next time you go to Target, all I want you to do is I want you to take note of any males that are in the aisle with you and
Mm.
see how many times they are in an aisle that doesn't really make sense. Right. And I've had a number of women come back and go, I didn't realize how many times men will come into an aisle, stare at me as I'm doing whatever. I'm completely oblivious to that. And now they're aware of it, right? So, like you talked about um, situational awareness. It's a big thing that I try to get people to understand is like, you can't tell people to be situationally aware unless you teach them how to be situationally aware. Situational awareness is a learned skill.
Mm.
Okay. So, like, while driving, you learn situational awareness while driving, mostly because they're habits, right? So if you have a 2-lane road that you're going down and there's a lot of stores on the in the US, it's on the right side, and then what happens is you follow too closely behind someone, slow down to turn a right, you know that you're probably going to bounce into the back of them, right? Rear end them. So your situational awareness is heightened to understand that any time that there's a turn, you are anticipating them being a dumbass and
Yeah.
then slowing down, right? So you either move to the other lane, and so what's happening is you learn this through time, but you are applying it in real time. Anytime that you're looking in your rearview mirror to get a grasp of how many vehicles around you,
Yeah.
so you can, you know, that's something that you have either taught yourself or somebody taught you over time. If you were to do that in self-defense, it is not a normal skill for you to understand violence without having been exposed to violence. And so to know how someone looks at you that's off, for somebody to approach you in a weird way, for that spider sense, that
Yep.
gut feeling, you
Absolutely.
know, to understand what that is and to hone in on that and understand that you need to listen to that, that is something that you have to train, you know. And so a lot of times I tell women at the beginning, I'm like, look, all I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you as many normal things that I think about or that I know that women do. And I want you to change one or two of them and it will make you safer. Right. So if you have a garage that you park your vehicle into and you go to your mailbox before you close the garage door, if you do that enough time, you will autopilot that process. And somebody could be beside your house. And when you do that, they could walk into your house. You wouldn't even know because it's when you are most comfortable.
Yep.
I want you to stop, just look around a little bit, be in the moment, and then go and do what you do normally. I'm not asking you to do anything outside that's different. All I'm asking you to do is be a little bit more aware. Okay. We can always say, hey, don't be on your cell phone when you go from the store to your car. That's not realistic. But what I am going to say is put your cell phone down, cross the street, and then you can look at, if I could get you to do that, you're incrementally safer because what happens is at least the person watching you is going to go, she's more aware than that girl that
Yep.
just walked across the street with, right? So like there's a complete difference there. You know, and I think passing that information on to civilians or those that are not comfortable in the environments that we're comfortable in is something that is very, very important because it starts to mold their mindset. It's kind of the whole thing of if you're trying to better your life, you want to do it at a 1%. You're not trying to fix your entire life, right? Like
Oh,
just
sure.
focus on a small portion. And then the other thing is I do a lot of psychological conditioning. So that I immediately going and use edge weapons in my
Yep.
training because it's a very, very intimate, up close. It's visceral. What happens is you have them practice techniques on each other because they usually bring loved ones, and it forces them to think about, could I do this?
So
And the thing
you're
is,
you're actually doing the Colonel Dave Grossman stuff that a human can't inflict uh, gross bodily harm or kill another human. You're inoculating that and desensitizing that straight away.
oh yes, sir. Yes, sir. And the thing is that all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get them to think about it. And I know that they wouldn't be able to do it, but they are closer to being able to do it than they had previously.
Absolutely.
And we have success stories where well, they're unfortunate scenarios because of violence,
Mm.
but they actually utilized the techniques because it was the only thing that could come to their mind. And at the time of the training, they were like, I couldn't even fathom doing this. But at the moment that it was happening, it was either my life or theirs. And
Yep.
I had the tools to be able to do that.
Yep.
And in 2 hours, you can pass on that information and it will change their worldview enough for them to either think about making that a priority or to do something. I like just one point. I like Jordan Peterson's thought process that if you actually affect someone, you're going to see a physical manifestation of something.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a female come to my class and they go for the 2 hours training, I know that something physically will manifest that they do or change in their life, and I've affected them. So if they purchase a blade, a folder to keep on them, because that is the most basic of tools that you can have on you, and they keep it on them, I know that I made them safer because now there was that physical manifestation of that principle, you know. And so like I think that's what you do when you do your training, and it is my focus anytime that I work with someone is to do that.
I love that you talked about um, that six. Oh, you didn't say sixth sense, but you said uh, that they
That
get a
gut feeling.
feeling, and you talked about train them out of that. I thought more importantly, retrain what they've lost because I believe that women and now men as well, we're too switching off of what's going on around us. In particular, people touching us, as strangers touching us. I'll never forget on one of my advanced courses, There was this old guy who's like 60 years old as one of the main instructors. Back in his day, you didn't touch another guy. You'd
Right.
flinch and you train
Mhm.
yourself out of that flinch. Classic thing with Tony Blair, the start or flinch. And it's just retraining that in these people, I think. I just want to touch on something you said there um, about changing, that person possibly physically and mentally. There's a book, Natural Born Heroes by Chris McDougall,
Mhm.
really interesting. And it talks about, the grandma in the bank and something happens or some other, it's a generalized scenario. And everybody else is cowering and she just launches and becomes the hero, has never fought in her life. She's a 65-year-old teacher or whatever.
Mhm.
I did ask Dave Grossman, I don't know if I asked Tony Blair, but what are your thoughts, given all your time? How much is it physical skill, a young man or strong male versus mental fortitude to just switch on that I'm going to survive this. I'm going to save that person no matter what. What do you think there, Michael?
So this is not my most, if not all of this stuff that I talk about is not mine. But this principle is, or this concept is from Jack Neville's. And he talks about skills. When people obtain skills and they become proficient at skills, then their confidence increases. And so the thing is that you have a higher tendency to charge towards that danger if you have the skill sets and that you know what to do. Like,
Right.
one of the things that I have to teach in martial arts when I teach comfortability in sparring or grappling, the first thing is knowing the lay of the land. If you can get people to understand what they're supposed to do, what they're striving to do, and then you create these progressive, very small, goal-oriented milestones,
Mm.
they in turn can take the fear that they have and try to minimize it and
Yep.
then just go to the next step. Whereas it's not about being the hero, it's just going, there's danger. I'm going to get to cover.
Yep.
Okay. That's the first thing I need to do. I get to cover. I scan the area. Do I have a weapon on me? Yes. I'm going to, like, now what happens is you're just progressively moving forward. And Jack's whole theory about that is just give them good, solid skills and principles that they follow. And in turn, that will be able to allow you to take the fear that may be in your heart and then push it onto them. And the idea is that the moment you can drive fear into them is the moment that you're going to be able to overcome those types of scenarios. And obviously there's a long methodology to that, but the idea is that you are giving people skills. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like self-defense as a thought process, because um, there are a lot of skills that you need to have to be able to deal with a lot of scenarios, like multiple opponents. People like to talk about multiple opponents.
Well,
If
let's
I have
let's
two,
talk about that. I was going to bring it up. Just to interject, you talked about about 20 minutes ago about being single focused and being that the sports, the jiu-jitsu, the boxing, about that one-on-one situation. And there was a real world situation with two MMA fighters, professional MMA fighters, that did them a massive disservice because they like fighting.
yeah,
They're comfortable. So when these males approach them, basically starting a fight with them, they're like, "Yep, let's go from verbal to bang." But they didn't realize that banging that one person in front of them, no problem. They forgot that there was five others, so it's seven bad guys and sorry, six bad guys and one bad girl. And of course, one girl just gets a 2x4 as MMA guys, winning the fight and
right,
smashes his head in with a 2x4.
yeah,
Perfect example of sport versus what we spoke about probably about in the first 10 minutes is having that big open view as you're going through as a special operations guy. We need to teach it in self-protection to the world rather than this one-on-one situation. It's completely different,
right,
isn't it?
yeah. Well, yes, and there's a lot of stories that come back from guys that we've trained that I can, relate to that story. And a lot of times when you look at them, no matter what you do, if it turned out bad, it will probably turn out bad regardless of what training they had, right? So like it's not one or the other, but there are best practices to do. For example, if you're dealing with multiple opponents and you can initiate the first part of that and damage someone so that they are having to focus on that, I can then immediately turn to the second guy, and now it's more of a one-on-one than anything else. And if I do enough trauma and I use angles and walls and doors, and like I can funnel people into certain areas,
Yep.
I can deal with one person after the other. And then if you have anything on you, tools that automatically allows you to do trauma very quickly to a number of people, it's just a force multiplier, so like the thing is that depending on where you stand on your use of force and that type of thing, that's a personal answer. But the idea is that I'm teaching you these skills of how to destroy the human anatomy. It's like
Yep.
when I teach edge weapons, I'm like, I'm going to make sure that you're not ignorant of damage. Like everybody carries an edge weapon, and everyone's like, in the worst case scenario, I'm going to draw this blade and I'm going to use it. And it's like, do you know how to use it? Do you know what type of damage that's going to do? And the answer is no, you don't, because you weren't trained. I'm going to teach you exactly how to make sure they can't use their hand ever again. I'm going to teach you how to stab them so that their arm is completely useless if you need to. I'm also going to talk about if you do it that in that scenario and you do it in a certain way, they will have a high tendency to bleed out. I'll also teach you how to use tourniquets and that type of thing to if you have to deal with the person afterwards. But the idea that you are carrying a weapon system that you're ignorant of the damage and then you use it and then you're like, I didn't know that was going to happen to the person, that's not something that you can claim after I train you. I want you to know exactly how to shut someone down, and then you use those skills when it's most appropriate. It's like, and so like I feel like that's the best way to approach it. But that is a very condensed version of training, right? So like, what's the difference between close combat or combatives and martial arts? And for us, it's martial art is an art. It is a lifestyle. It is something that you study for your whole life.
Oh, amazing discipline, all that massive respect, of course.
Right. Like I'm a 30-year martial artist, right? You can't make basic training 30 years long, right? So
Exactly.
like the thing is that you may have to do these techniques tomorrow.
Exactly
That's the
that.
difference. Real protective skills work today, right? So if someone's in front of me and I need to get rid of them and I pull my knife and I stick it through their eye socket, that will work today. There's nothing, it's not pretty. You may question why I did that. But the thing is that that is a technique that will work. And in turn, there is nothing outside of that. If I teach you an armbar in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it is lucky if you will be able to pull that off on purpose within 6 to 8 months of consistently grappling. That's one technique, and like that's the thing, like, and that's, that you're in for a long haul when people teach you how to get beat up. So if you go to judo, they don't teach you throws first, they teach you how to fall.
Yep.
Why? Because you're gonna fall a lot. So like that is the long-term thing. Now, if I were to train somebody effectively from like the time that they're a child all the way forward, would I teach combative sports? Yes, absolutely. I would train them in a very similar way that I was trained, probably a little bit more focused. But like the thing is that I would give them those skill sets because they are invaluable. The grit, the ability to be in bad scenarios and think outside the box while you are taking shots during sparring, while grappling against somebody that you can't beat and they're just grinding you out. And the only reason that you can't stop is because they're not letting you, because they're not tapping you. Those are all skills, balance, understanding, where their arms are through tactile sense. These are all things that you learn in martial arts and combative sports. But those are not things that you can pass on very easily in a very short amount of time,
No,
and
no.
that's the big difference, and I see you doing that a lot with your skill sets, on the how not to die stuff. And it's
Thank you. Look, it's so important to me. And look, one of the, it's a title on one of the shows is one of the lads. a man without purpose is lost. And I just enjoy passing on my special forces training and experience to others. Uh, for it's going to sound airy fairy, but I was going to say for the greater good. But if I can help someone, if I can help just one person with something I show them or say, or that you said by presenting, then that's paying it forward. That's done the job.
Absolutely. No, and that is one of the things about these types of so I do virtual training courses, or I do these videos online, and the reason that I focused on that more than schools is because of being able to reach more people.
Yeah.
Right. And so like these conversations and the principles that we're talking about, and the differences in views or backgrounds, it'll reach more people because it's on video than if we were to try to set up conferences,
Oh, of course. Yeah.
and that's the big thing. Like I have a trauma psychologist who is probably one of 10 in the world as far as his in his field.
Hmm.
And one of the conversations I had with him was like, hey, do you do these do you have a video where you can pass it on to all of the paramedics and all of the law enforcement people? And he goes, no, I just go from place to place to place. And I'm like, well, isn't that can't be as effective as doing videos? And he
Yeah.
goes, well, the thing is that I tried to do that, and the technical know-how and the ability to produce that and edit it and spend time on the curriculum is impossible for me. And so this
Wow.
is how I do that. And it's like, you are one of the best in the world, and you are restricted because
By time.
you're yeah, and it's like, well, what if we were to fly you in, put you on camera, because I have my own camera crew, we edit your stuff and we put that out there, we give it away for free for anybody that needs it. Will that, he goes, that would be a dream. Like those types of things is like, that's the importance of doing and meeting people virtually like this and talking about it, because there's going to be something where somebody talks or says something, and it's like it's going to click, and they're going to be just that much safer. And so that's what it's about. I mean,
100%. Now, perfect time to segue into literally you're wearing scallywagtactical.com.
yeah.
So you talked about edge weapons, and maybe you'll touch on samurai buns. I mean, I tried to do a bit of research.
Yeah.
Skallywag Tactical, and I didn't know it was related to you until I went on really quickly and looked at the MDV knife. And I'm slow on the uptake, right?
No.
And man, you've got some really, really cool things on that website. Some amazing blades. Normally, you'd have to go to about 5 different manufacturers for all those different things. Um, Talk me through Skallywag Tactical. How did you get involved? Samurai buns. What a great example of actually, and this is on Instagram for everybody listening.
Mhm.
Actual application of it in a real world environment. Yeah, how did you get started, and what's the
Yeah.
story there?
So it'll be easier to cover this right away. Samurai Buns, she's an amazing young lady. She trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. She's a student of mine in Jiu-Jitsu now, but she had always had the mindset of knowing that Jiu-Jitsu and the sport applications that she found in California was not actually the best stuff out there.
Right.
And so she had sought out training, and she had a mindset of being open-minded and being able to take all of the edge weapon stuff and the understanding that women can draw people in where men are not able to do that, and
Absolutely.
utilizing feminine traits to enhance your ability to protect yourself is better than trying to teach more forceful tactics that are more appropriate for violent, capable men. And I understand that people get up in arms about everyone being equal, but the female has the ability to draw you in and cause massive trauma because you didn't even expect it right out the gate, and then you won't even be able to recover if you're trained properly. And one of the things is that she embodies the warrior mindset of just sitting there and going, look, I'm going to dress as I dress, and this is what I'm going to have on me, and I'm always going to have something on me that, and these are principles. She's been to 2 of our Skallywag training events, where basically what we do is we condense our counter ambush courses, which are 2-week courses, and I condense them all the way down to 2 full days through a weekend. And what we do is we do learning, right? So the difference between learning and training is learning is the information that I'm giving you, right? The training is the drilling and the consistent practice of a single thing over and over and over. So what
Yep.
we do is we just take the learning and just drive it into 2 days, and it's on you to drill it into practice. But she's been to 2 of those. And so it's a great, I send a lot of people to her Instagram that are females to try to kind of get a look at, where can somebody carry a blade if they wanted to, and that type of thing. As far as Skallywag Tactical goes, I believe it was about 10 years ago that I saw an ad for a dagger, a D2 dagger. And I reached out to Craig, and Craig Burhard is the owner, and he's an amazing guy. Basically, everything about Skallywag is his personality.
Oh, wow. Cool.
It is, he is one, that company is very successful because of that man. And the thing is that he had heard of me, and he was like, hey, I would like to get together, talk about it. So he flew out, and we sat down and we talked for a little bit. And, he was like, I have all these knife designs, and, I would like your opinion on them. And I was like, I've tried to get knives made in the past, and I was quoted things like $100,000, to even attempt to build a knife. Right. And through Skallywag Tactical, I have designed 3 knives. 2 of them are available now. One's a folder that's coming out real soon, but it was the first time that I had a manufacturer fully open to taking a look at my background, sitting down and listening to what I had to say, and then giving me a realistic outline of, okay, this is what's possible, and I was like, the value that I can bring is we can take a look at all of your designs, your upcoming designs, and make it purpose driven.
Mm.
Like, and that's one of the things over the last 10 years I'm very, very proud of, that Scallywag that Craig has done, is he has knives that are designed as knives. Like, a knife maker makes a knife, and then somebody purposes it towards something, right?
Yep.
So what happens is, like, look at this cool knife design. What was that designed for? I don't know. It's a cool knife. It's like, okay, so I can use this in, the field, or I can use it for self-defense. And it's like, there was no purpose behind that, and how many millions of knives are created like that?
Yep.
And I was like, what would make you a little bit different than the majority of companies is having purpose-driven tools. Like, this knife here is specifically designed for this, so like the MDV knife, which Craig forced me to use my initials as the name. I didn't want to put my name on it, and he's like, well, what are you going to call it? And I was like, well, I want to call it the kite. I want to the KITE. It's acronym for knife in the eye. Like, I thought that was funny, and he's like, no, marketing, you can't do that. He goes, we're going to put your name on it. So, like, that's how that came about. But that knife there is designed as a concealed carry blade. Like, it's designed so that you can carry it in your pocket. It's designed so it's small enough that you can keep it in your hand, so that you can grab people, manipulate. It's small enough for you to shoot with it. So if you have a pistol in your hand, it doesn't change your grip. Because a lot of times blades are designed by people who have edge weapon skills, but they have
Mm-hmm.
no real gunfighting skills. And
You
it's
got to
like,
remember what the people with a gun are doing with a knife. Is it to
ex-
clear to get to that, and so on and so on? Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's a secondary tool, right? Like, so if I'm creating a device that is going to alter your natural shooting grip that you built your skills off of, you're going to absolutely hate that device. What if I gave you a knife that you never had to worry about altering your shooting grip? So if you're able to put round on top of round with no knife in your hand, and you're able to do it with that knife in your hand, and you don't have to worry about anything else, would you be more apt to carry that? And the answer is yes, because now I'm focusing on that person, right? And so I was like, purpose driven tools are more important than cool weapons. And then the other thing, there was a number of things where it's like, hey, we need to alter the sheath. Like one of the things I hate about edge weapons is people create their knives and then they don't focus on the sheath at all. It's like,
Mm.
how are you supposed to carry this thing, right? It's like, if you don't put any effort into that, it could be the best knife in the world and you're not going to be able to carry it. And so like what happens is the thought process of going, hey, let's focus on this. The other thing is they from the beginning started with D2 steel, which is tool steel.
Hmm.
um and I understand that you could sell the knives for cheaper if you had a lower grade metal, but the
Hmm.
thing is that the guys that I worked with, um they had to use that blade over and over and over again, and if they hit something hard, they can't have it break off, right? And so I always enjoyed how his go-to was D2. I mean, you can take that and bury that thing through a cinder block and it's going to be there.
It's amazing. I
And so
tried
like,
I got a blade a while back, maybe about 5 years ago, a Dynamis, but long story short, it's Winkler knives, and Daniel Winkler was great enough to come on the show. But I tried to sharpen the thing one day, and I was like, I'm trying to sharpen the steel of something that's made to cut steel.
right. No, yeah, no, you definitely have to grab something that's a little bit diamond sharpeners and stuff like
Oh,
that.
for sure. It's strong
You know.
stuff. So
So
the so Skallywag's blades are D2. You've got the MDV sheath option. Um, I saw on there's the long ones as well. It reminded me of the World War II smatchets.
mhm. So the Guardian is that design of um having something on your kit that you didn't have to physically look down to actually access, right? So
Right.
the thought of having a small ring device or weapon on your plates in between gear means that unless you are just amazing, when somebody's trying to kill you and you need to access that weapon, you trying to take your finger and find that small little hole is probably not going to be the easiest thing to do. So we create a large knife that somebody that is larger than normal while having gloves on in full kit can reach down, have a positive grip on that, know that they're going to be able to do damage. It's long enough to pierce the aortic arch or top of the heart if it's penetrated through the subclavian or behind the clavicle. Understanding all of these types of things, and the serrations were built so that the internal damage when it was inserted in the area would be so devastating that those of a medical background would not want to try to fix that person. That was one of the things working with the medics that I asked. I was like, if I were to drive this through someone, I want to make sure that they have a less likelihood of you being able to patch them up. There's
Mm,
continuous internal bleeding. It was completely designed for the guys that I was working with at the time.
yeah.
Like that was a purpose-driven knife, and people have critiqued me on the thought process of one of the serrations goes back towards your hand. That allows you to place that blade on someone and then just start cutting, because the enclosed environment that you're going to be is higher. So I didn't want it to get caught on anything. I wanted to
Mm,
just start doing damage. And you know, the D2 allowed it to be durable and that type of thing. So yeah, that was the first blade that we made. And then the MDV was the second one that has been very popular for concealed carry.
yeah, I
Um,
must say with the MDV, as you know, uh, I carried the trainer for a couple of weeks, and I mean, I've carried lots of different blades in my career, and the fact it's not a ring, I never went for these ring ones. Is it the bench made? the skinny thing. I just thought under high stress, under duress, you're not going to be able to do that. And we know that for a fact.
Mhm.
Colonel Dave Grossman literally said it in his book on combat. But every time you feel for you've got that open hook on the MDV, it's really positive. It looks flimsy, but as soon as you get it, you just know where you are in your hand. So it feels very organic, very natural.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple of things on that hook. One was it was purpose driven. So like we were trying to figure out how to have something on either your gear or on your person so that all you did was you just slid, and then
Yeah.
what happens is you get a positive contact. There's nothing wrong with loop uh or ring blades. The thing is that there are literally thousands of them. So there's no reason for us to create a blade with that.
Mm.
The I told Craig, I was like, I will only design knives where I feel like I'm helping the community or upgrading it in some way or providing a solution to an actual problem, or just whatever that is. And so we designed the hook in a way so that if I go into three fingers here, it's not falling off my hand
Mm.
at any point. So like if I had to, for whatever reason, I had to draw my pistol, I have the ability to do that, and what happens is I'm able to work whatever that is, right? So the thing is that was there. I wanted to make sure that you could grab it like a normal karambit, where your finger goes in, like it doesn't go all the way back. This is where like that gets tight. But the
Hmm.
thing is that you're hooking here, and then now what happens is you have a blade that's in here. You can rotate in, you can do all of your normal stuff. Get close to somebody, work that in, talk to someone. The sheath itself, or the sheath itself, was designed so that I could have it in my hand, talk to someone, and then draw it off of them, and then go here or just work. The big thing about gunfighting is the fastest draw is to have the pistol in your hand. That's why if you foresee danger, a lot of time law enforcement or military automatically draws their weapon. Using that same principle of having it in your hand, and then being able to return it somewhere without worrying about cutting yourself,
Yeah.
was a big thing. So like the thing is that for women, we have these folders. I'm sure you're familiar with Emerson's.
Yeah.
Like, so what happens is you have your hook that catches, it automatically opens, you can use that on the draw. um I convince women to carry their blades just because, like, it has to be on you. Because if you get in a car wreck, you're gonna have to cut yourself out of your seatbelt and your
Yeah.
child out of your seatbelt. You have to break glass, that type of thing, which is not easy. But the thing is that we would talk about, well, what happens if you have to walk towards your vehicle and you know that there's a group that you are very uncertain of? Like, how do you do that? Well, the fact is having a weapon in your hand is technically the safest and fastest way for you to be able to access that. And so what I would teach them is to take their purse, open this up inside their purse, grab the lip of the purse so like the knife is actually covered by their purse, keep
Mm.
it to their chest, their keys are in their other hand, and they just walk by wherever it is that they're afraid of. And so what happens is they can do that. They can get to their vehicle and they can just drop that in their purse, get into their car, close the door, drive away. If anything happens, they just let go of their purse, and now they have a knife in their hand. Men can do that with a paper bag that they find in the trash bin, that type of thing. They can reach down there, do that, stand next to someone. um have issues with that, but the thing is that the idea of taking these tools and utilizing them in scenarios so that you can bring it to bear quickly, is a skill set that has to be passed on, and it's a mindset.
Yeah, I
you
was just going to say it's a mindset. Everything you're saying, it's been through the whole thing. It's that comprehension of the situation. And hey, all the people that come to us that have never been exposed, they don't know what it's going to be like. And hopefully we expose them in a safe environment and help them out. But it's mindset. Um, just one thing on that, you talked about breaking glass. Literally an hour before our show started, SWAT guy over in the UK told me about a job he went to just the other day. So they're armed response vehicles. They have two persons armed in a vehicle, and they go to the jobs because in the UK the police aren't armed, right? They go into
Right.
this job where a car was on fire and the person was trapped inside with his children in the back. Get there, it's a Tesla.
Yes. Right.
Can't unlock from the inside or the outside because the electrics are fried. And he just smashed it with his glass breaker. He always carries a glass breaker on his pocket and so on. And we've got them everywhere. The glass breaker pins, the tactical pins. They're brilliant. But he managed to do that and got the guy out and got the other ones out the back. But I'm bringing that up because carrying a blade just as an option, a metal pointy thing that's going to save someone's life in that instance. It would have saved the guy's life if he had one inside. Can also save your life doing a bit of aeration to somebody that's trying to do harm to you as well.
No, absolutely. Yeah, the MDV folder, which is right here in the back, we have a glass breaker on the bottom of it.
Oh, awesome.
So it's a folder version of the MDV, and we placed a glass breaker on it because you can carry a secondary device that's a glass breaker, but for me, I was just like, well, I mean, I can create a smaller blade where I place all of these into it, and then I can get people to carry it and be like, look, breaking glass without a glass breaker is extremely difficult. And if there's any tint on it at all, it's going to be ridiculously hard to get through that. And people have these survival tips of you can take the headrest off and
It doesn't work.
and
So as a firefighter, we literally have to break the glass. We train on wrecks all the time. And of course, we've all heard this. We took the headrest off, smashing, it was just bouncing. We saw a video of a guy yesterday throwing a jack at a car window, bouncing.
Yeah, we do glass break demos on our counter ambush classes.
Awesome.
And we just have guys, and the interesting thing is the make and model of the vehicle dramatically changes the ability to drive through, but the majority of the time you'll have one of the big guys in the class and they'll draw their pistol, they'll draw their 320, and they'll sit there and be like, use the just slam that as hard as you can and see if you can break through it. And 9 times out of 10, no matter how hard they hit that thing, it just bounces off. In fact, the damage to the pistol is a lot more than anything on the glass. And it's like, now take a glass breaker and just take the frame and then just tap it, and it almost explodes, right? And the thing is, it's just like, that's the tool for the job. Like, that is the whole mindset, right? And so, like, in that environment, did I use that to hurt someone? No, I used it to save my life, my child's life, my wife's life. Like, I knew that I had to cut myself out of something. So carry it just like you would carry any type of medical on you, any type of medicine that you have. And the thing is, if you're going to carry a tool like that, why don't I teach you ways to use it as a force multiplier? Jack talks about a seminar that he did where the instructor was like 6'4" and really big. And so what he did was he grabbed a child that was 8 or 9 years old and was like, hey, I would like to do a demo. And so he brought both of them in front of the class, and he's like, I would like to talk about something about realistic personal protection, right? So he taught the young child how to run up and do a Superman punch. And basically he's like, can he Superman punch you in the stomach? He goes, yeah, that'll be funny. And so the kid runs up and hits him as hard as possible, and everybody laughs. And what happens is he goes, the thing is that no matter what you teach him, he'll never be able to do enough damage to a full-grown adult to cause problem. And he goes, we're going to do that demo again. And so he pulls out his knife and he goes, I want you to take this knife and I want you to do a Superman punch on his stomach and see what happens. And then obviously the instructor's like, no, I don't agree to do that. And he goes, see, now what's the difference? The difference is the fact that it's the same child. He's doing the exact same movement, but now with a blade in their hand, it becomes a life-changing event. And it's like, that is the reason why I advocate for edge weapons. I don't advocate for use of edge weapons at an inappropriate time. But if your daughter makes a bad decision or gets tricked into going to a party, and then all of a sudden there's 2 or 3 large males around her, there's no self-defense that you can teach that young lady where she is actually going to get out of that scenario unscathed. If
Exactly.
you teach her how to use a blade in that scenario, I guarantee you that is going to change the dynamic of that scenario. Now, whether or not you want to talk about those scenarios and the psychology of all of that and that type of thing, that is completely up to you. But the reason that you use edge weapons, just like any weapon, is to enhance your ability to cause trauma quickly and then, go from there. You were talking about multiple opponents. Jack talks about a law enforcement officer that he trained that got jumped by 3 guys.
Yeah.
They had taken him to the ground. One guy had a choke on him and was just like locking it in and choking him. And he's like, in that scenario, none of the training that I had, and he was off duty at the time. He goes, none of the training I had kicked in. He goes, but what you said just rung in my head, and it's what saved my life. He goes, Jack talks about getting steel in them is going to change the dynamic of the fight. And he goes, it made me remember I had a knife on me, and he opened the knife up and he stuck it in the guy's arm that was choking him. And
Yep.
the guy opened up, and then the other 2 just dispersed, and it was like the fight was over. It was done. And the thing was is that, yeah, in that scenario it could have upgraded, they could have drawn a weapon or whatever, but the fact is that in that scenario things were going bad very, very quickly. And the fact is that nobody died in that scenario, but he used the edge weapon, the tool that he had on him, because he carried a knife all the time, to potentially save his life, at
Oh,
least.
absolutely. It's funny you say that scenario, not a funny scenario, but uh, fortuitous you brought that up. The instructor for us, the chief instructor, is Jeff Tank Todd, and I'll never forget him talking about
I know him.
oh good, yeah, small
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
um he was talking about, he was at a big seminar, 1,000 people, back when seminars were things. And this guy's, I think Tank's saying, I can get out of any hold, something along those lines. And this guy goes, oh, some holds are made not to get out of. And he goes, oh, is that right? Okay, well, why don't you come and put the hold on me? And for once, he actually let him do it. Normally, it's like, well, you got to get the hold on me first. And the guy put him on the chokehold and wrapped his arm around, was going to, choke him down. And Tank just whips out a live blade and goes to cut his arm off. And the guy's like, Jesus, what are you doing? He said, this is combat. I'm not here for sport. I'm going to cut your arm off and beat you to death with it. And the
Right.
guy goes, okay, I think I see what you mean here. There's a difference between combat and what I teach. And it works every single time. You said about force multipliers, putting steel in them, that girl surviving with those guys. Come back to the start, what I said, there's no rules as long as you win.
Right. Yeah. And it's so I met him when we were hosting the International Close Combat Association's annual get together.
Yes.
We actually ran that we hosted it at our academy in North Carolina.
Wow.
And we had a initial headbutting, not with him, but with the other instructor that was there. And so, as you can tell, I am all about realism. I am all about using weapons and understanding that there's a difference between sport and combatives and realistic training. But I am very, very keen on the fact that you need to respect combative sports and skill. And the
Exactly.
thing is that there are no techniques that are magic pill like type of techniques. There are no
We used to think
magic
about that when
fixes
we were
that
kids. We are thinking about the magic death touch.
yeah, exactly. And throughout the seminar, like what was happening was there was a lot of bad talk about combative sports. And it was like, if the guy were to do a takedown, I'm just going to hammer fist him in the back of the neck and it's going to break his neck. And it's like, well, you're letting the guy do a takedown on you and you're assuming that you're striking, or it's like, I'll kick him in the knee and, it's going to drop him, or I'll kick him in the balls. And, And at the time, I was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and obviously I was training in special forces. And I went up to my father. I was like, I can't deal with this. I just so I retired for the night. And then the next morning, um, they kept doing it. And dad goes, "You want to do a little demo?" And I was like, "Yeah." And so what happened was we gathered everybody around, and what happened was they had an instructor that was my age, that was there, and he goes, "We're going to do a little demo." And he went to Todd and the other instructor and had already cleared it and was like, "This is what we're going to do. It's going to be a real fight."
Yep.
And what happened was he talked to the crowd, and he goes, he used to do this all the time. It was always nerve wracking. And he would go, "If you had two people, one person is only allowed to do grappling. They're only allowed to do takedowns. They have to do sport application. So, they not allowed to hit. They're not allowed to eye gouge. They're not allowed to do anything outside of a sport tournament rule set."
Sure.
And then you had somebody that had the ability to do no rules. They can eye gouge, they can do whatever they want.
Yep.
Who would win? And everybody was like, "Well, the person with the no rules." And he goes, "Well, we're going to test that out." And so he's like, "Mike, you can only grapple." And then he talked to the other guy and was like, "Hey, you can basically do whatever, just eye gouge him, whatever." And so I was like, I had already worked with him, so there was a little bit of an understanding of what he did. And I just put my hands up, walked towards him. He threw a right cross. I slipped. I got behind him. As soon as I got behind him, he tried to grab my groin. I took him to the ground. I moved him out of the way. I got to a Kimura position from a north-south, and I felt this pinch on the inside of my thigh, and the guy had bit me. And I was like, "Oh." So I squatted, and then I torqued, and I got the Kimura, right?
Yeah.
So not the whole point of it was, when I stood up, I was like, "That's it, we're done." And we shook hands or whatever.
Yeah.
The thing was is that my father then talked to the crowd. He goes, "What you forgot to ask about was skill level.
Yeah.
If you are dealing with somebody who's extremely skilled, all of your eye gouging, whatever, if they're not applied appropriately through ambush, you are not going to be able to deal with somebody that has 20 or 30 years of fighting experience,
Exactly.
because you're in their element. You're in a fight, right? So the thing is that the lesson that we were trying to project was, you can't give magical techniques, but none of these techniques are bad in the proper context. Right. So like drawing a knife, so like if you're in a scenario where you lull them into false sense of security, a young lady is in a violent scenario and she's like, "No, no, I'll do whatever you want," and then what happens is, during the time that they're adjusting their belt, she reaches down, grabs a knife, hugs them, and then sticks the knife in their neck. That is a scenario where that is a magical technique that works, because she used the proper context, drew them in, and then at the most appropriate time during ambush, she used that. Now, you can get into the thought process of whether it's right or wrong for you to escalate to that level. I'm not going to, because that's not my responsibility. My
Mhm.
responsibility is to give you skills and you use them whenever you want. Like, your use of those skills has no bearing on my character. It has to do with you. So if I teach you how to drive and then you run over people, that has nothing to do with me. That has to do with you having something wrong with you.
Yeah, of course.
So
Yeah.
like the thing is that if that young lady in that same scenario, before she lulls him into a false sense of security, grabs the knife and exposes it and goes, "I'll cut you." And then he grabs her hand and punches her in the face and makes
Mm.
her drop the knife and then continues to do whatever.
Mm.
That is the same skill that she tried to use. She used the knife in the wrong application at the wrong time. There was no ambush, and therefore that is a danger. So,
Mm.
like, the idea of being able to pass on these skills and know the difference. I don't care how many martial arts black belts I have experience. If somebody sticks one of these knives through my forearm, it destroys my ability to use my left arm.
Mm.
I will be less effective.
Yeah.
And I don't care who you are. So if you have the ability to put steel in someone, you're going to alter the course of that fight or scenario.
Yeah.
And it's just those types of things. And it's like prioritizing, like, how often can you train more than likely, and can you be able to pass that on? So yeah, so we met, and then the thing about Todd was we broke away, and he comes up to me, he goes, hey, can I talk to you? And we talked for 30 minutes after that, where he's like, everything you're talking about is 100% what I teach. And he goes, what about this? And we did techniques back and forth. And he was actually a really cool guy. I really liked how he approached things. I just feel like sometimes the information, it loses its context over times, right? And so what happens is people lean too hard on one or the other. I feel it's a spectrum of skill sets. Like, you need to be able to have your sport or combative sport understanding. You need to be able to know how to deal with punches and dodge and take a shot, whether or not you can. And then you also need to know how to cause a massive trauma to someone and then be able to work on that. And I feel like the BS that's passed out is just where people go into that. My father talks about a medical thing, is like the old school nasal bone into the brain technique.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's he goes, that's a lazy man's way of not having to practice close combat. It's basically the thought process that, no matter what you do, whatever your skill, I just have to hit you underneath the nose. He goes, medical, medical research and technical probability is really important. Like, is that a feasible thing medically? Well, if it was a possible thing to do that, boxing would cause so many deaths because of uppercuts that it would, that right away that it's not a good technique. He goes, but let's say that for some reason, when you hit them underneath the nasal bone, which is cartilage, turns into a steel pipe, and it drives all the way through their skull. Somehow, magically, it happens. He goes, "Do you know what a lobotomy is?" It's like you take the frontal lobe out of the brain, like, it's like, so he goes, when I talked to the forensic pathologist, I was like, how does that work? They're like, we have no idea. We were going to ask you how that worked, because the only thing that we can think of is if there's damage to the frontal lobe and it's done improperly, they can get an infection and die over like 6 months or something like that. Like, they're just trying to find a way that it would work. He goes, so that's one of those things where you just like chalk it up to, oh, but there are 3-letter agencies in the US that used to teach that as a primary skill set. And it's like, well, that's questionable.
That probably brings me to my last question to wrap up. But I'll just talk to that specifically, and it does relate. There was a case in the 50s about a mafia hitman in one of the cities in USA, and he killed 13, responsible for 13 murders. And they only found out about him because every one of the victims had a little scratch or cut on the back of their hand. What would do was he'd walk down the street towards his target. He had a nail file, slightly sharpened nail file, and as he walked past me, just scratched their hand. And as soon as I looked down, he just palm jabbed them right up in the chin.
Oh,
this is very different, and not, I'm preaching the choir with you. I'm painting the picture for the audience. Palm jab the chin. Either they smash their teeth, they smash the vertebrae at the back. At the very least, they fall down. And if they weren't dead before they hit the ground or disabled, he just stamped on the head, and he keeps on walking. 13 deaths, and they put it down to that. So a little bit of the old school there, which transitions into my last question for you, Michael, is you've trained special ops for so long. Your dad, specifically with the medical knowledge behind it and research, what have you seen? And I'll just get this right, in the real world, and in the GWAT, and since 2001, in the 20 years, what have you seen innovation wise in close combat? And I'm talking without weapons, without weapon systems, so in the unarmed style. What have you seen that works and has been thrown out? Has there been any innovations through combat after action reports that you've seen?
As far as ambushes, or as just far as techniques that are taught
Sorry, so I
overall?
should have contextualized it better. So if, say, we're going through rooms, weapon fails, guy's too close, or if it had to be non-lethal and it's gone into a confrontation, what's working out there on the ground, in the sandbox, in these places? What do the guys come
So
back and tell
what
you?
one of the things about whoever you're training, you need to focus on what their mission set is. And so in that mission set, you're talking about being in close. A lot of times those encounters happen, at least from what has been told to me by the teams from Jack, is like when you go into a area where it's populated or there are people inside the house that are
Mm,
not bad guys, the likelihood that somebody's going to grab your weapon or reach up and hug you because they're a bad guy is not as high as somebody trying to get out of the room because these men in black are like shooting everyone and they're scared and they're trying to get out of the house and they bump
mhm.
into you, right? And so like he goes, the idea is that in those types of scenarios, your ability to hold your weapon in a way where the sights don't get jammed directly through your face, as you're moving around, and being able to either pummel or do structural damage or soft tissue damage. So, like popping them into the groin so that they back away and then transitioning to something or then causing damage to be able to get back to your weapon system. So, like the fact is that a use of an edge weapon or use of their actual firearm. Or I'm sorry, the use of edge weapons or use of hand-to-hand skills is not their mission set. It's just a
Exactly.
supplement
Of
to be
course.
able to get back to it,
Yep.
right? And so, like the thing is that you are training them to one, make sure that they stay mobile because as long as they're mobile, they have a chance that their teammates are able to, help them.
Yep.
You don't have multiple attackers on you because it's very quick where you're in an environment where there's more of them than you, that you have, multiple people. So you want to be on your feet. So you don't want to lose balance and get taken to the ground. So you want to focus on those types of skills. And those are not actually hard skills to pass on, and then using the gear that they have allows you to leverage certain things. Like we talk about weapons of opportunity, which could be barriers for other areas. So, like the wall could be something that could hinder your movement, or it could enhance your ability to offset your balance and then drive into whatever it is. So, like you can use that to your advantage if you know how to do that. And so, those were things that are passed on. As far as self defense goes, we focus on soft tissue targets, which are eyes, throats, and groin, through the ambush and then causing structural damage. So, meaning you are causing as much trauma so it doesn't work. I don't care if you feel the pain. What I want to make sure is that it doesn't work,
Yep.
right?
Absolutely.
So if I grab your fingers like this and I squeeze them as hard as possible and I torque them and then I break them by going backwards, I'm going to turn the wrist and the fingers in the opposite direction and try to make sure that every time that you lift your hand up, your fingers are pointing east no matter where you're facing. Like I know that if I destroyed your fingers in that fashion, you won't be able to close your hand.
Exactly.
That allows me to then move on to a larger joint or to access something or disengage or whatever.
Yep.
And the thought process of knowing how to do that with small joints first and then going to larger joints is very important. And then being able to add mobility is huge. So if you have some time to work on them, then you focus on those. And then all you do is you just go back and then you just evaluate their capabilities in the scenarios that they're going to be in and add other skills that you may learn through combative sports, but you learn them through a long time. So, what is the main principle behind practice? Well, it should be the fact that if you just practice something, you are not necessarily going to get better at it.
No,
You need
but you be
focus.
permanent at it. Your practice makes permanent.
Well, if you practice something and you rep it, it doesn't mean that you're actually getting better in a contextual area where it's actually going to work.
Mm.
You want focused practice,
Yep.
something that is very, very specific to what you're looking at doing, right? And so, like the thing is that the better I got at jujitsu, the more I realized that like everything that I did that was really exceptional was because I focused in on a very small area, and all I did was I honed in on that. And anytime that area came up, I was able just to knock it out. Anytime I did this broad scope thought process and I practiced something like that, it
Yep.
never really helped because it didn't fit perfectly. One of the things you learn in grappling, especially, which I believe is one of the hardest things to learn. Like people say, jujitsu is easy because it's not you're not learning all these different techniques. And I'm like, I think that's wrong. Like the fact is if my hand is 2 inches down or 2 inches to the right, it completely changes the dynamic of what I can do. And I have to learn a new technique or a new whatever for that. And then I have to rep it. And I was like, so, identifying what's most effective, and that works across the board. So on you, on somebody that's 350 pounds, somebody that is a small female doing it, to a larger person, or what happens when you go to the gym and you completely destroy yourself and then you walk out the gym and then you have to use those techniques. Like
Exactly.
if you use techniques that are strength based or you need to be in your prime, well, you just used all your energy inside the gym. So you are less effective than you actually are, or what happens is like, it's Christmas time. You're on the ladder and you're putting up stuff and you fall down and you bust your knee and now you're walking around with crutches.
Yep.
You need to have skills that actually can allow you to translate into that. If somebody attacks you at that point, like,
Yes.
it's those types of things. And once again, we're going back to mindset and we're going back to what is a practical thing. Like what can you actually pass on? And what I find that instructors hate about this thought process is you don't really keep students that long. It's the thought process that as a personal trainer, I'm going to teach you how to get in good shape by yourself.
Yeah.
You're going to be the only reason that you're hiring me is because you want motivation, not because you don't know how to do it. So everything I do, I'm going to teach you why I'm doing it and how to alter it so that in like 3 months, you can stop paying me and you will continue your results. Those that don't actually do that are trying to retain their student or their client over a
Mm,
large period of time. And I'm like, I feel like that is a disservice. You have the ability to give them the ability, and that's what my jiu-jitsu instructor gave to me. The first thing he taught me was how to actually train myself. And he's like, this is how you break stuff down. This is how you scientifically attack things to figure out what works, what doesn't, so that you by yourself without another instructor can actually get better, even though you don't have guys that are better around you. And I feel like that is the big skill that really changed everything for me, where I'm like, I can learn skills now regardless of if it's in this environment or if it's technical skills like the virtual training stuff. I can do that because of that one thing that he gave me. And it's like that's an amazing gift. And if you can do that, you don't retain students as long, but you have loyal students because what they do is they bring other people to you, you
of
know.
course, because it works. Yeah. Look, we're very much on the same mindset, same and same journey. It's, I mean, I only knew your background from what Ash has said and from what I've researched there, but none of this was known to me. And I'm the same. I've someone uh, from 4 years ago has done a 4-hour course with me that my job is to teach them. Their job's to practice. And you said the same thing about an hour ago. Um, it's to teach, and it doesn't take long to teach something, and then they just got to practice that more and more and more. Um, yeah. Look, thank you, Michael. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm glad we covered off all the things. I got my notes there, and I got them all ticked off, which is great. Um, yeah, I got to say congratulations with Skallywag and congratulations with A U. Um,
Thank you.
really, really good to see somebody doing such quality stuff, and it's just been an absolute honor to be able to share your story a little bit there. Parts of it, I mean, gosh, we talk for ages. Um,
I'm
or
sure we could talk for hours for it, so I
Absolutely,
really
I'll put
appreciate
everything
it.
in the show notes for the audience there that we've talked through the websites. Um, Thank you so much for your time. And again, where could people find you? Where's the best place? Is it just the websites? Is it the socials? What's
Yeah,
the
so I have social media on Instagram as well as Facebook, but the thing is that eliteu.com and scallywagtactical.com,
Yeah,
you'll be able to find me. So,
yeah, they're great websites. They really are. Look, I'll hit pause. We'll have a chat, but thank you so much for your time.
all right, brother. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.